Creature Commandos is a new DC series that is now streaming on Max or wherever you get your HBO and Max shows. This is obviously a show that was highly anticipated because it is also the official start of the new DC universe. This is being headed by James Gunn after the establishing of DC Studios. He finished up Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 at Marvel, and then he was chosen to lead this new path for the franchise. And in this, once again, we follow a bunch of supervillains and misfits who have been put together by Amanda Waller in order to carry out a mission that they may not all make it back from. In this case, taking on Cersei, a Themysciran warrior with superpowers, and she wants to kill the Princess of Pakistan, and that's something that the Commandos have to stop from happening. But as they get there, stuff gets a little more complicated, and eventually they have to fight against all odds in order to complete the mission. The thing about Creature Commandos is that it's something that fits right up James Gunn's alley. This is something that he knows to do pretty well. Take a bunch of characters who no one really gives a damn about usually, doesn't give any thought to, and make them compelling. Guardians of the Galaxy accomplished that very well with the 3 movies that he did. The Suicide Squad did very well for those characters, and then Peacemaker did that for Peacemaker. And now with Creature Commandos, that is something that once again does come through in this show. He once again takes a bunch of characters, some of them who we have seen before, such as Weasel, and makes them a lot more compelling, giving them some very emotionally affecting backstories and things to latch onto so that when the going gets tough, we are behind these characters. And each one of these characters is realized pretty nicely. The core team is given a lot to work with, particularly the Bride, played by Indira Verma. So she is easily my favorite character of the entire season, and I doubt I'm the only person who's going to say that. She is given a lot of emotional backing, and her entire arc surrounding this idea of finding an emotional connection to something while usually discarding everything in her path is something that does come to fruition, especially towards the end of the season. And it's a very well realized character, and I thought she did a great job. Some of the more compelling characters like G.I. Robot, voiced by James Gunn, I thought was really great. In fact, there's an entire episode dedicated to him when it comes to the flashback aspect, which I thought was really, really fun, especially when it comes to the motivation surrounding why he does what he does. He's a robot that was essentially built to kill Nazis, and unless he finds that there are Nazis, he gets a little less interested about killing. And so the entire episode follows these arcs where eventually whenever he is given the green light that these are the Nazis, you have to kill the Nazis, he is all ready to fight. And he's also someone who thinks back on his earlier troop very fondly, the soldiers that he was serving with. And so there's a lot of nice emotional connects to that. There's also a really great episode which was very heart-wrenching with Weasel, because in the Suicide Squad, something that you're introduced to is that he killed 27 children. But when you watch Creature Commandos, you realize something went wrong over here, because he didn't kill 27 kids. In fact, he was accused of killing 8 kids, which is also not what happened. He was playing with a bunch of kids, and then a bystander with a shotgun decided to take matters into his own hands, thinking he was dangerous, and eventually blew up a school, and that got the kids killed. And then the police made matters worse by not letting Weasel save one of the kids. It's incredibly affecting, and suddenly it makes a lot of the connections that Weasel is making along the way feel a little more heartfelt. Like he doesn't want some things to happen to characters because it brings back those memories. But he can't talk, so then those characters don't really get to know. So it's definitely, something that does leave a lump in your throat, and I really like that episode as well. Also, Dr. Phosphorus, played by Alan Tudyk. Once again, a character who just has the worst kind of, origin story, with this idea of his family being killed by mobsters and eventually being atomized into something which is similar to what happened to Dr. Manhattan, but in his case, he turns into this acidic creature who anyone touches just melts. And so eventually he becomes this murderer out for revenge, which, can you blame him? He's out to get everyone who did him wrong, and eventually seeing some of that is, genuinely, there is some kind of catharsis to it, even if it's just incredibly gory and violent, which is another thing. This show is very gory and violent. There are a lot of really awful things that happen with the sequences over here. The funniest storylines, I would say, were with Eric Frankenstein and the bride, especially Eric Frankenstein. I thought David Harbour was very, very funny in this. And eventually, as he's going on this quest to find his wife again after he got jealous of Victor Frankenstein and, killed him in order to, get the bride's love only to himself. That particular aspect, as he goes around the centuries trying to get her but failing every single time, very, very entertaining, and definitely one of those side plots that was really fun to get to every single time he showed up on screen. Eventually this comes to Rick Flag Sr., played by Frank Grillo, and he is someone who is on this mission also because, well, Amanda doesn't have his son to work with anymore because he died at the line of duty. And of course, if you've seen The Suicide Squad, you know that. That's what happened. But his particular character also, it's nicely realized, and he's just trying to continue the mission that, his son was going to do and, keep that alive in some way. And so I liked how they were able to add to that aspect as well. There was some emotional depth behind that too. And so as you can tell, every single character manages to have some kind of rooted basis into everything that's happening. Eventually, when the action commences, it's incredibly violent, and a lot of bodies are on the floor. There's a lot of blood, guts, and gore over here, and it's relentless. It's incredibly crazy and over the top, as well as you're expecting from James Gunn at this point, and that's something the show does not shy away from at all. It manages to be incredibly funny and heartfelt while also just being rampagingly hyper-violent and really living up to that aspect of it. In fact, if this was live action, it'd be crazy. Like, The Suicide Squad is pretty intense. But this makes The Suicide Squad look like just another Tuesday, which is, it is the case with those characters, but it is just something that I thought I would mention. The music choices, once again, from Gunn are really good. There's some really great cues over here and some really memorable tracks. Some of my favorite ones play in, especially the episode with G.I. Robot. I thought that was really, really fun. Some of that over there. There's also some stuff that plays in the episode with Dr. Phosphorus's flashback and some of the stuff that's going on in present with them as they're trying to complete the mission. That was really, really cool. And so there's definitely standouts to be had there. And there's also a bunch of surprising cameos along the way. One of the ones that I think most people know about now is Clayface. That was a really fun sequence, very intense, but very well done too, extremely entertaining, and I did really, really enjoy that. There's also a very quick blink and you'll miss it cameo from Batman at one point, which establishes Batman in the DCU. The one thing that I will say character-wise that I would have liked a little bit more of are the antagonists, especially when it comes to Cersei. There's a lot established about her early on, especially when it comes to this following that she's gained, and all of that is taken down very quickly. She is kind of a red herring to the story, so I guess it's not something that's hugely important to them, but Cersei is a bigger character, so I think you could have done a bit more over there for sure. But once that red herring aspect does come up, eventually the main antagonist being this thing like, okay, the princess, actually, Ilana, she is the one who is responsible for whatever's about to happen, and Cersei is just trying to prevent the future right now. That aspect of it, again, there are some things which don't really come to fruition towards the tail end, and while there are some satisfying conclusions to that, I think some of it could have been developed a bit more. That said, it does lead to one very good moment, which brings me to my final character analysis, that being Nina's. She's easily the most tragic character because she's good. She's a girl who was born without a proper working set of lungs, and then when her father tried to do something about it, she eventually got the appearance that she did. And she's someone who hasn't been accepted by anybody in society, and eventually she's just had a very sad life. And so she is essentially the very tragic emotional character in all of this because she's not someone who would ever really hurt a fly. But when they say that maybe you have the best chance of killing Ilana, eventually that doesn't really work out and Ilana kills her. And so it's very sad because you do see this very pure-hearted, innocent soul die, but it really drives what the bride does towards the end of the season, which is eventually saying, listen, I'm going to kill you now, not because I think you might destroy the world or because of World War III or any of that bullshit. I'm going to kill you because you killed my only friend. And that's something that is also established as the season goes on because, again, there is that coldness that the bride has. And so eventually killing Ilana was something that, yep, that works. So that way I think there is a satisfying conclusion over there. Although, there are things about that towards the end which do kind of stay a little bit up in the air, and some stuff I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of. There are some things still left open-ended when it comes to some characters, so maybe season 2 will cover some of that. But overall, despite those issues, I did have a good time with Creature Commandos Season 1. It's not perfect. I don't think I love it as much as I loved The Suicide Squad or Peacemaker. I thought those two things were really, really great. This one, definitely a slight step down from those two, but still very entertaining. And I'm very excited to see what James Gunn will do with Superman. I'm pretty sure that's where his priorities lay while, making this. So I'm very curious to see how he'll pull that off. I loved the trailer for that, so fingers crossed over there. And yet, because I enjoyed so much, I'm gonna give Creature Commandos Season 1 an A-. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe and enjoy the show.